The chairman of the Magistrates Association in England and Wales has said that appointing more people who've committed minor crimes to the bench would help increase diversity among the judiciary. Currently, people who've been convicted of minor offences, including shoplifting, can become magistrates, but it's not something that's been publicised well enough, he thinks. It's hoped that better advertising could also help boost falling magistrate numbers. Well, we'll speak to the chairman of the Magistrates in a moment. Also with me, Luke Rigg, who's a magistrate in North London and one of the youngest. Even to you, Luke, thanks very much for being with us. John Bache is chairman of the Magistrates Association, and he joins us from home. John, thanks very much for being with us. Let me start with you first. Has it always been the case that people with minor criminal records, however that's defined, could become magistrates?
Yes, there's been no change at all there. That's been the situation for a long time. The problem is that people don't realise it. And what's happened quite frequently is people come up to me and said, we're interested in becoming magistrate, but we're not going to apply because we got a speeding offence 10 years ago. Now, they'd be quite wrong not to apply, because the fact that they've got a minor offence, such as a speeding offence a long time ago, does not mean that they're ineligible. We're trying very hard to increase diversity in gender and age and ethnic background as well, but we want really everybody to apply and see if they are suitable.
You're getting a bit of pushback on social media this evening from some people who are kind of, I think, trying to join some things together that you hadn't intended to join. When you talk about more diversity, so more black and Asian magistrates, for example, more women, you're not making any connection to these groups, are you? You're not saying more people with criminal records come from these backgrounds or that background. You're just saying a wider pool of talent.
Absolutely not. We want people from all backgrounds, and we're not saying that the two are unconnected. The diversity in terms of gender, age and ethnic background is completely unconnected to the fact that they've got a criminal record 10 years ago. And there is no link at all, and we're not implying that there is any link at all whatsoever.
Good. I'm glad we've cleared that up. Let me ask you one point then about this. You know, what sort of offences have magistrates committed in the past, if I can put it like that?
Well, by far the majority are minor motoring offences. I'm not condoning them because obviously they're breaking the law, but it does give them a criminal record. But really it can't be compared with the more serious offences. If somebody's committed a serious offence, there's no way they're ever going to be appointed as a magistrate. But if they've been speeding at 35 in a 30 limit 10 years ago, there's no reason why they shouldn't be appointed.
Shoplifting offences as well?
A very rigorous appointment process.
Shoplifting offences as well?
I wouldn't like to define any particular offences because each one will be taken on its merits and they'll be considered by what's called the advisory committee, and they will make their own decision according to the person in front of them.
OK, let me bring in Luke at this point. Luke Rigg, you're a magistrate in North London. You've been serving how long now?
3 years.
And how old were you when you started?
I was 20 when I started, right. Yes.
Now, what reaction have you had from people in court? Because I can imagine, conceivably, some defendants looking at you and saying, how can he be a magistrate? I know they say policemen are getting younger, but magistrates too. And no disrespect, but what life experience somebody of your age brings in passing judgment on other people, some of them a lot older.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much the surprise in the courtroom, it's also the retiring room where all the magistrates are there at lunchtime, and you turn up and you realise everyone there's got grey hair and is of a certain age. But, you know, I think we need to make the magistracy more diverse. We just need to get on and do that. I think we've talked about it for a very long time. We just need to get on with it now. And then in terms of life experience, I have heard that a lot. I think the thing is, though, that people of different ages have different life experiences, and that's the point. And a huge number of people that I see in court are of a similar age to me.
Do you think then in the deliberations you have with your fellow magistrates, you are able to bring something to that process? I mean, when you hear some of the cases, some of the explanations that are offered by defendants or those conceivably representing their solicitors, is there something you're able to say to, can you think of an example you've been able to say to other magistrates on the bench, it's just something that's out of their life experience because they're so much older? Yeah,
I'd be wary of straying into that because at the end of the day we have sentencing guidelines that make sure that all magistrates across the country are broadly following the same kinds of guidelines. But an example would be the kind of thing like alcopop was mentioned in one of the cases, and the other two magistrates didn't have a clue what that was. So it's more that I'm able to bring some knowledge of kind of real life cases if we're doing a trial or something that other magistrates might be able to do if they have a profession alongside them being a magistrate that allows them to have a greater understanding of the area or a particular aspect of life. And that's the whole point of the magistracy, where we reflect society.
The age issue is clearly a big one. I mean, is it fair to say that most of the magistrates you sit with are middle-aged or older?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Nationally, over 50% of magistrates are over 60, and we have to retire at 70, so there's going to be a huge recruitment issue. And that's why it's great that John is raising this particular issue, because we need to promote the fact that you can become a magistrate and you don't have to be retired. You can do it while you're working, and that's great. And I sit in a North London court, and London is a particularly young city, and still, when I go in time and time again, there aren't that many magistrates who are young, and so any opportunity I and John and other magistrates can do to promote the message, we're really willing to do that.
Basically, 18 to 65, you're eligible, providing obviously you don't have a background of previous serious criminal convictions. Just on this question of diversity, and it's a kind of catch-all word. When you look at the ethnic makeup and the figures nationally, it's about, I think I'm right in saying it was about 13%, and that's not actually out of line with the population as a whole.
Yes.
I mean, presumably, particularly in London, there actually are quite a lot of black and Asian magistrates.
Yeah. Again, talking from my personal experience, on our bench, and I know some of the other London benches, the ethnic minority representation is not as high as it should be, given the nature of the boroughs that we kind of sitting in, and the representation of defendants as well. And I sit in youth court as well as adult court, where we see 10 to 17-year-olds. And again, there is a kind of lack of representation of ethnic minorities there. So actually in London, it's something that's still important.
And just briefly on the youth court side, since we haven't really touched on that, that presumably is a place where actually seeing somebody who looks like you, i.e. isn't grey and bald and all the rest of it, actually does have an impact. There is more of a potential kind of understanding and perhaps, but what about the respect issue? Because sometimes young people don't particularly respect other young people.
Absolutely, and in the youth court, and I believe John sits in the youth court as well, it's a bit more of an inquisitorial forum rather than an adversarial one in the adult court, and that means we actually have a conversation with the young person who comes before court. So it's even more important that there's that dialogue and that the young person actually fully understands the consequences of what they've done and understands that what we're saying means something.
Thanks, John. I know you haven't necessarily heard all of that because of some technical reasons with the line, but let me ask you finally, how big a kind of crisis are you facing as magistrates in terms of numbers overall?
I don't want to use the word crisis, but the magistrates have to retire at 70, and there have been a lot of retirements and less appointments over the last few years. So we need approximately 9,000 magistrates over the next decade just to stay still. And at the moment, we've not got enough magistrates. So we really are looking for quite large numbers. And we're encouraging people from all backgrounds to apply and see if they are suitable. So we do need quite large numbers, and that's true throughout England and Wales.
John Bache, who is the National Chairman of the Magistrates Association for England and Wales, Luke Rigg, Magistrate in North London. Thank you both very much for joining us on BBC News.